How many goblins could a goblin gob if a goblin could gob goblins?
Hey gang! Using the promo code MTGMudsta, all caps, will get you 10% off any order over $10 at Flipside Gaming. It'll also get you 10% off any orders of singles at Multizone. And it'll get you 10% off most products at Original Magic Art, with the exceptions of some paintings. If these fine sites don't have what you're looking for, you can also consider using my affiliate link when ordering from TCG Player. And if you'd like to join the generic Goblin Gang to support this channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description below. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's game is another one filmed at GAMERZ CO-OP, and it's a bit of an old one, but Eric is bringing his Márton Stromgall deck, keeping 4 Mountains, Molten Birth, Reiterate, and Kozilek Butcher of Truths. Brian is playing his Dragon deck, keeping Cavern of Souls, Kokusho, Numot, Watery Grave, Badlands, Scourge of Valakut, and Verdant Catacomb. Armin is playing Meren, keeping a Forest, Green Sun Zenith, Birthing Pod, Liliana Heretical Healer, Survival of the Fittest, Overgrown Tomb, and Wooded Foothills. Jason is playing Emmara, keeping 3 Forests, Fierce Empath, Croson Verge, Glare of Subdual, and an Arid Mesa. Armin wins the die roll and starts us off. Armin plays a Wooded Foothills, passing. Jason plays an Arid Mesa and sacrifices it, taking 1 to go and find a Shockland tapped. Eric plays a Mountain. Brian plays his Verdant Catacomb and sacrifices it to find a land. Armin follows this as well, sacrificing the Wooded Foothills. Armin plays a Forest for turn and casts Green Sun Zenith where X is 1. He goes into his library, grabbing Birds of Paradise and passing. Jason plays a Forest and pays 2 mana for Emmara. Eric plays a Mountain and casts Faithless Looting. He draws 2 and discards 2. One of them is Kozilek, which has him shuffling his yard into his library. Brian plays a tapped Watery Grave and passes. Armin plays a tapped Overgrown Tomb, but has 3 mana to cast Liliana Heretical Healer. Jason plays a tapped Croson Verge. He casts Selesnya Signet and swings Emmara at Brian. With her being tapped to attack, this gives him a 1/1 soldier with lifelink, and Brian then takes 2 commander damage. Eric plays a Mountain and casts Molten Birth. It makes him 2 1/1 tokens, and he has a coin flip to see if he gets the spell back to hand, but he fails. Brian plays a Cavern of Souls and names dragons. He then pays 2 mana for Dragon Tempest and passes. Armin plays out Meren in his main phase and then a High Market as his land for turn. He sacrifices the tapped Birds of Paradise and gains an experience counter with Meren. This also makes him a zombie token with Liliana and transforms her. Someone then unfortunately knocks the tripod, and moving to his end step, Armin then brings back the Birds of Paradise. Jason plays a Plains, and Emmara goes at Brian again. This makes Jason another token, and has Emmara dealing 2 before Jason passes. Eric plays a Mountain and casts his commander, passing. Brian plays a Badlands and casts the reduced costing Scourge of Valakut. He has its Enter the Battlefield trigger plus the Dragon Tempest trigger each deal 1 to Jason. He then goes to combat, swinging the Scourge at Jason as well. At the end of turn, Jason sacrifices the Croson Verge to go and find a Plains and a Forest card for the field tapped. Armin casts Vampiric Tutor on his upkeep, losing 2 life to find a card and put it on top. He then casts a Sakura Tribe Elder in his main phase, sacrificing to find a basic, but shortcuts and brings it back with Liliana first, and then sacrifices it again. This pushes his experience counters to 3, and he then passes, bringing the Sakura Tribe Elder back at the end of turn with Meren. Jason plays a Forest and hits Brian for 2 with his soldiers, gaining 2 life back. He then plays out Glare of Subdual, and then a Fierce Empath. This lets him tutor for a big creature, and he reveals a Hornet Queen, putting to hand. Eric plays a Mountain and casts Faithless Looting again, which he drawn. He then drops Lightning Greaves and moves them over onto his commander, passing. Brian plays a Command Tower and casts Kokusho. He gets 2 triggers, 1 from the Tempest and 1 from the Scourge, and simplifies things by having both deal 2 to Jason. Before moving to combat, Jason uses Emmara and the Empath to tap down Brian's dragons. Brian then passes, and Armin sacrifices the Elder at the end of turn to find a basic. Armin plays a swamp and drops a birthing pod. He pods away his birds to put out Priest of Titania, and then down ticks Liliana to bring back the birds. Going to combat, he hits Brian with Meren. Armin then moves to his end step, bringing back good old Steve. Jason also uses his newly made soldier token to tap down the zombie token with Glare of Subdual at the end of turn. Jason makes 6 mana in his main phase for a Captain of the Watch, making more soldier tokens as she enters, and pumping the pre-existing ones with her static ability. He goes to combat, swinging the 3 lifelink soldiers at Armin, who are now 2/2s, who also have Vigilance. Armin decides to block one of them with the Elder, sacrificing it to prevent the damage and the lifelink. He still takes 4 though, and Jason gains 4, and Jason then passes turn. Eric casts Wheel of Fortune in his main phase, and they all pitch their hands, drawing a fresh 7. He then plays a Raging River, which I'd never seen before, because obviously combat should be complicated, and passes turn. Brian draws and plays Marsh Flats, losing 1 to go and find a land. He grabs a plateau and plays out Sakashima, who comes in as a copy of the Scourge. This triggers the Sakashima as the Scourge coming in, the real Scourge, and the Tempest. He does the Scourge triggers to Jason, dealing 6, and the Tempest trigger to Armin for 3. He then passes turn. On Armin's upkeep, Jason uses the Glare of Subdual to tap the birds, priest, and birthing pod down. Armin then pays 4 mana in his main phase for Green Sun Zenith again, and goes to find a 3-drop. He puts out an Eternal Witness, returning to hand Dictate of Erebos. And Armin declares he'll move to combat, and Jason taps down Meren by tapping Emmara, and gains a soldier token for doing so. Armin then passes, and at the end of turn, brings back the Sakura Tribe Elder, while Jason goes on a tapping frenzy, basically hitting everything but Márton, who has Shroud. Jason plays a Sun Petal Grove for turn, and then plays out Earthcraft. He taps enough mana for Null Mage Shepherd, and then taps the Empath with Earthcraft to untap a basic, putting Squirrel's Nest onto that basic. This gives him the potential to make infinite Squirrel tokens, although they won't have haste right now. Going to combat, 7 soldiers go at Brian, dealing 14 damage since they're 2/2s, but only 4 of them have lifelink, and Jason gains 8 life, and then passes turn. Eric plays a mountain, and casts Chaos Warp on the Earthcraft. Put into the position of use it or lose it, Jason decides to make infinite Squirrel tokens. He then sadly says goodbye, shuffling the Earthcraft away. He then reveals off the top a Terastodon, who enters, and gives Jason the choice of blowing up some non-creature permanents. He decides to hit the Raging Rivers, Dragon Tempest, and Birthing Pod, giving each of his opponents a 3/3 elephant in the end. Eric then flashes back Faithless Looting, drawing 2 and discarding 2. The cards discarded are Anger and Thopter Assembly, which means Eric's creatures and future creatures will have haste as long as Anger is in the yard and he controls a mountain. Eric then casts Skull Clamp and passes. Brian counts up his mana and casts Karthus in his main phase. He has both the Scourge triggers go at Jason, and before combat, Jason taps all of Brian's board and gains another token from Emmara being tapped. Brian then passes, and at the end of turn, Armin sacrifices the Elder and flashes in his Dictate of Erebos. Before moving from the end step though, Jason then taps enough creatures to blow up the Dictate with a Null Mage Shepherd. Armin moves to his upkeep, and Jason keeps tapping his stuff down, hitting Armin's mana dorks. Armin then draws for turn, and taps a lot of mana in his main phase for Protean Hulk. Armin then makes a deal with Jason that he won't swing at him, and Jason lets him swing the zombie token at Eric for 2. Jason untaps and draws, playing a Forest for turn and casting a Song of Freyalise. This lets him tap his massive token army for 6 mana to cast the Sun Titan, and the Sun Titan enters and targets the mirror entity in his graveyard to bring back. Armin decides to respond, sacrificing his Protean Hulk with the Changeling on the stack, and he gains 1 life from using the High Market, and goes to find as many creatures as he wants as long as they have a combined total of 6 converted mana cost or less. He only needs 1 creature though, grabbing a Massacre Worm, which like Jason was afraid of, takes him out. Eric also loses some creatures and loses 4, and with nothing else, we move to Eric's turn. Eric untaps and plays a mountain. He recasts his commander, and puts the Greaves onto him, and then clamps the elephant before passing to Brian. Brian untaps and plays Haven of the Spirit Dragon as his land drop. he taps enough mana for a Savage Ventmaw, and has both triggers from the Scourges deal damage to Armin for 12. He then decides not to attack, and passes. Armin plays a Ravenous Chupacabra in his main phase, who enters and takes out Karthus, cutting off Brian's haste enabler. This also has the benefit of Brian losing 2 from the Massacre Worm. Armin then does way more counting than I'm comfortable with, and finally casts a Phyrexian Delver. It enters, and he loses 7 life to bring back the Protean Hulk, but gains 1 life as he sacrifices it immediately to the High Market. This lets him put out more creatures, and we see a Viscera Seer and a Shriekmaw. The Shriekmaw comes in and takes out the Scourge, which has Brian losing 2 more life to the Massacre Worm. Armin then moves to his end step, and with enough experience counters is able to bring back the Protean Hulk, which he immediately sacrifices again to the Viscera Seer. This lets him find 2 more creatures, this time a Deathrite Shaman and a Grey Merchant of Asphodel. The Grey Merchant comes in and has enough devotion at this point to take Brian out, and Armin gains a healthy chunk of life before passing to Eric. Eric draws and prays to RNGesus. He plays a mountain and casts Rally the Horde, and removes his top 3 cards, with the last one being Mass Hysteria. He repeats the process, with the last card being a Mana Crypt, and does it again, with the last card this time being Solemn Simulacrum. He repeats it a 4th time, but sadly ends on a mountain. Eric then counts up how many non-land cards he exiled, and it's an even split 6 lands and 6 non-lands, making him 6 1/1 warrior tokens. He then goes all out at Armin, and Márton pumps his board to make the creatures +7/+7. Sadly, they don't have trample, and Armin then heads to blocks and puts some bodies in the way. He stops it all, and gains more experience counters if they die. Sadly, Eric knows the swingback from Armin will be too much, and scoops up the game to him. Game review time. So, I think this is one of the times where people need to be more aware of what your opponents are doing, not to mention you never leave a Meren player alone. I realize there was some kind of unspoken beef between Jason and Brian, but I think Brian should have definitely tried harder to talk to Jason to let him swing some of his dragons at Armin at least. This is the 2nd time that I've played with Eric's Márton deck, and it's certainly interesting. At the time, he jammed a lot of those weird combat cards like World Enchantment kind of stuff from earlier in the game that really make things complicated and weird. It's not my cup of tea, but more power to him for building it, and hopefully I'll get to the 2nd game eventually. There was one point in this game where I think Brian could have taken Armin out, but even if he had, I think he was dead to the crackback from Eric on the next turn. Please be sure to tune in every Monday and Thursday at 11 AM Eastern Standard Time for a guaranteed new video. You can also follow me on Twitter at MTGMudsta. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MTGMudsta. And lastly, you can check me out when I stream at twitch.tv/MTGMudsta. This video is brought to you in support by my patrons. If you're looking for a way to help out the channel, please be sure to visit the link below. Thank you all for watching this video, and don't forget, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.